Hello and welcome to the Outside the Cockpit post-race or Portuguese Grand Prix post-race recap. My name is Sam Donzig. I'm joined by Julian Quinterio. What's going on, Julian? How are you feeling today?
I'm doing well. We had a very interesting Grand Prix, to say the least, this past week. And when I say interesting, I mean not that interesting at all.
Yes, it was.
Compared to the first 2 weeks, we had two amazing races on the edge of the seat all the way through, start to finish, in both the first Grand Prix. But this one, it seemed like life was finally going back to normality compared to the past couple seasons. We had a bit of a snooze fest in Portugal, but that could have been attributed to a variety of things. But in the end, that's just how it is. So, either way, I'm happy just to see racing. And what makes those races even more exciting are races like this one, which come off so dull or straightforward.
Yes, indeed. All right, let's move on to the let's go to the race results here. Let me just pull them up. Yeah, let's take a look here. So, we got Lewis Hamilton obviously finished home first, Verstappen second, Bottas third, Perez fourth, and then Norris, Leclerc, Ocon, Alonso, Ricciardo, Gasly, Sainz Jr., Giovinazzi, Vettel, Stroll, Tsunoda, Russell, Schumacher, Latifi, Mazepin, and Raikkonen DNFing on the first lap. And those are your race results really quickly of the 2021 Portuguese Grand Prix. Let's move on to, I want to talk about this, the race strategy. Did Red Bull ruin Perez's race by, not pitting him by pitting him so late, and he pit him in lap 51, 52. What is it? What are your thoughts on this, on that strategy from Red Bull?
So when I thought about this strategy, when I was seeing it live, I'm like, so we just saw Lance Stroll go 35 laps on soft tires, which means the soft tires can be relatively durable and Perez could push. So what I was thinking was, they're having Perez stay out so he can either A, be a moving roadblock for Hamilton once Hamilton inevitably catches him. He'll end up being in fourth afterwards. But then put on the soft tires and catch Bottas, who was sliding for that entire second half of the Grand Prix. Have Perez bring the charge, bring in points for Red Bull. I was thinking that would be the strategy. They didn't go through with that, and I was just very confused as to what they were doing. I don't think they did it on purpose. I think they just felt like Hamilton would be a lot slower when it came to out of the pit stop. They felt like maybe he would have been there to hold him up a little bit longer so Verstappen could have a fighting chance. In the end, that didn't happen. Hamilton passed Perez with ease. His pace didn't seem to let up. In fact, it seemed like he got faster after the round of pit stops, even on cold tires. So, I just feel like this was just a misguided decision by Red Bull compared to some of the gaffes we've seen from Ferrari in past years, Red Bull in past years. I don't think this one was at all intentional. It was just they thought the race could go one way depending on the strategy, and just the strategy didn't go their way.
Yeah, honestly, I thought he was going to pull a Lightning McQueen where he just wasn't going to pit because, like you said as well, the soft tires lasted 35 laps. So I'm like, I think he could go all the way on the mediums, but obviously at a certain point he was probably starting to feel some vibration. And obviously he did finally pit. What was interesting is the fact that Lewis Hamilton he thought Perez was lapped, or he was lapping Perez, but he was like, no blue flags. You were racing him. He was just leading the race for a good solid 10 laps or something, but he did pit. I would agree with you. I think it's an interesting note that you bring up the whole idea that, he was a roadblock. And I think it did work for a little while where he kind of did somewhat hold up Hamilton because at first he thought, he's a blue flag, he's holding him up. But I would think that with that in mind, I think Verstappen coming into, obviously, you want the roadblock there so that Verstappen can catch up with Hamilton to then pretty much get Hamilton and overtake Hamilton, which we did see after the race restart early on and stuff. But again, Hamilton then overtook Verstappen there. So I would agree with, again, not intentional, not as bad as the other gaffes as well that we've seen. I think it was just, again, they make these crucial these crucial decisions where they're like, okay, it's either going to work or not going to work, and some things work and some things don't, and this just didn't work. But it was interesting strategy from Red Bull to see this kind of boldness is we're just going to keep Perez out. We're not going to pit him until lap 52. We'll put softs on him, obviously. Try to go for the fastest lap at the end. Didn't really get it. Actually, who did get the fastest lap? Was it Perez or was it?
That was an interesting point. Verstappen got the fastest lap on the last lap, but they found out that on that lap he went just over the curbing, and so he had his fastest lap taken from him, and Bottas ended up the race with the fastest lap. But talking about the entire aspect of the Perez strategy, another reason why I think Red Bull was thinking that would work, it wasn't a case of Fernando is faster than you. It was blatantly them telling him you have to do this, if not you're screwed. if there's one thing that anyone knows about Sergio Perez, when he first came into F1, Checo, he has been considered one of the masters at conserving tire life. We saw it today. He went 50 laps on medium tires. That's absolutely insane, regardless of the degree of wear or anything. Like he was absolutely bossing it in that aspect. Got to give him respect to where it's due. But I feel like Red Bull really overestimated that aspect. They're like, hey, he's a tire conservative. If we can get him going on, get him a safe stint on the softs, like he can go all the way with the softs, no problem, no stretching or anything. I feel like he can challenge Bottas. I feel like that's just what they were going for. It didn't work out. But in the end, Perez, he's done amazing so far for Red Bull. I believe he's gotten what was it? A third? Oh wait, where did he finish? I believe he finished fourth in Imola, didn't he, or did he finish fifth?
No, it was fourth in Imola, fourth in Portugal,
He's
and
only
then
finished fourth, wasn't it? Or did he finish?
No,
on the podium?
it was fourth in Bahrain. Then he had that little gaff in Imola because he spun off, so he finished like down in the points or outside of the points. Yeah, but no, still had a great qualifying. But no, I would agree with you. Perez is showing like they made the right decision signing Perez as that second driver because the biggest problem I think we talk about like Red Bull's drivers is that they push them too early on. And they force him into certain positions that they're not ready for. And Perez is ready for this, so it was a good move for them to do that. Let's move on to the battle between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. It was somewhat close on Sunday. It wasn't as close as the past two races and stuff where we saw them battling out and dueling. There was certain moments and stuff where it was close. But what were your overall thoughts on the battle between Max and Lewis this past Sunday?
It was interesting all around, like after the safety car came out and everything due to the Raikkonen incident with Giovinazzi, Max did his best to try to hold Lewis. But if there's one thing that we noticed today in Portugal, and we saw it practically for the whole weekend, the car really suited the Mercedes. Red Bull gave it their all and everything, but they didn't have the car to compete on a track like Portugal. The large variations in height definitely hurt them a lot in the changes of elevation, and they just didn't seem to have the speed down the straight. I remember I was watching it. This isn't specifically Hamilton. This was when Max was behind Valtteri for a large portion of the race. And I swear he went like 10, 11 laps within half a second of him on the straights with DRS, and he just couldn't pass him. Like he just didn't have the pace to get past Valtteri. And I think that's just the problem Red Bull had this weekend. Max was amazing, was able to drag that car. And if you look at how Perez was doing, he also had amazing pace this weekend, at least for the car. They were both pushing 100% for the vehicle. I think they did what that Red Bull can do to its maximum. Maybe if Perez's strategy put him closer to Bottas, he would have been able to pass Valtteri. I feel like that definitely would have happened. But in the end, the Red Bull was just not faster than the Mercedes this weekend. And I think it was smart for them to try to have him be a roadblock for Hamilton to give Verstappen a chance. But we saw that earlier in the race between Valtteri and Max. Max just didn't have the speed to stay behind Valtteri on the straights. He was able to catch up after the pit stops where we just saw Valtteri fall off a cliff. But during the Max-Lewis fight, I think that might have been the only entertaining part of the race. We saw him going back and forth like, 2-3 laps. That was very fun to watch. But then right there, Hamilton said, all right, I'll see you later. And Hamilton just waltzed away into the distance, took the win. Max had a great drive, finished second still. He's still right there for the championship. They're still pushing hard for it, but in the end, not much one can say specifically to these performances. Just this Portugal was just not a Red Bull track.
I would agree with you. Yeah, it seems like, and they were talking about it on Sunday during the broadcast when they had like Christian Horner on the pit wall live and stuff. They said, it was just like, it was not your weekend this weekend with terms of pace. Like Mercedes just had the quicker car in terms of the track and stuff. You can push as much as you want. You can extract as much as you want out of the car as Perez and Verstappen did. But like you said as well, yeah, there was multiple times when Verstappen was going down the straight and he was like so close, and you think he would catch him because he's within half a second and he has DRS, but it just wasn't enough. But then you saw Hamilton go by and he was able to easily do it with DRS. So you can clearly see that obviously Mercedes versus Mercedes, same car, same power, that's going to happen, but not with the Red Bull versus Mercedes, where that is that difference and stuff. So I would agree. In terms of the Max versus Lewis battle, it was very exciting to watch. It was probably the most exciting thing to watch. But I honestly, one thing I'm just going to kind of comments with these battles, I wish we saw more, I wish they would show more midfield battles between other drivers, not just because I'm watching the race and all I can see is just the top 3, top 4, but it's like, sometimes I want to see other, the midfield drivers, get into the points and stuff, like Ricardo going from 16th to 9th. which we'll talk about later and stuff, and his insane performance and stuff from like after a poor qualifying performance. But like I just wish they had showed more of that and stuff. It'd be a little bit more exciting to see and stuff than just watching the main drivers. Would you agree with that? Or
I mean, in the end, we always just want to see good racing, and it really just comes down to certain points on the track. We could see it sometimes. There were issues with the camera work. Formula One's had some of those issues depending on the circuit. And they had that issue last year in Portugal. They're having it again this year in Portugal when it came down to where they could place the camera crews. That could have definitely played into it. But yeah, Ricciardo had an amazing drive. And regardless of the finishing position, I feel like Sebastian Vettel really got screwed out of his first points finish of the season because of strategy. Strategy was very, very crucial in this race. We saw Sonoda slide down the grid. We saw Russell, who started right outside the top 10, just absolutely fall like a rock in water during the entire Grand Prix. Mick Schumacher had some nice pace. Nikita Mazepin had some solid pace as well during the race. It's crazy for Haas, but like they just don't. The people who were able to show pace compared to what they've usually done, they had good strategy. The teams that ended up faltering, we saw they ended up having a struggle with strategy. Portugal really didn't come down to that much on-track action. It came down more to who was able to get it done in the pits, and really that's just how it be sometimes.
Yes, indeed. All right, let's move on to most impressive driver. Who did you have as I gave 1 to 2 most impressive drivers for the race weekend?
I kind of hate to say it. Because he's not exactly a very lovable character. Not many fans like him at all. But as someone who knows the sport, you got to give props to where it's due to Nikita Mazepin. He showed some solid pace. The Haas is by far the slowest car on the grid. And, he's obviously been struggling a lot compared to Mick. But in today's race, you saw him. He was able to, get a couple moves past the Williams cars. He was able to push up a bit. He had some solid pace. It was comparable to Mick Schumacher. So got to give props to Nikita Mazepin where it's due. He's been having a very tough time, and I am by no means a fan of his. But he was still solid in a Haas car that is supposedly not going anywhere. It's weird to say because you guys know me. I'm not a fan of Nikita at all. But one's got to point it out. Another guy, though, this is the obvious answer for who was the most impressive driver of the day. Daniel Ricciardo had an absolute stormer. Started 16th, very poor qualifying in that McLaren. He ended up able to push up to 9th. It had a lot to do with strategy. It had a lot to do, let's say, with the Raikkonen-Giovinazzi accident that harmed both the Alphas. So that was something. Sonoda went down the grid like crazy. Also affected him. And Alonso, Vettel, they also didn't have great races. So obviously that played into the fact. But you can't take away from a 16th to 9th drive in a grid where, sure, the front runners, the front two teams are going to be going back and forth, maybe finishing in a checkerboard every weekend. But the midfield is where it's at. And we've seen Lando Norris have absolutely amazing races to start off the season. You could say Ricciardo's been a bit underwhelming. I saw a lot of people saying he was underwhelming after the qualifying session that he had on Saturday. But you got to give props where it's due. And Ricciardo had a very, very, very good weekend when it came down to race day. I think he was the most impressive. He definitely showed that he still has that class behind the wheel.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think I'd say for number one driver, I was going to say Lando Norris, but Lando Norris, I think, and Daniel Ricciardo are kind of my two most impressive drivers because starting with Lando Norris has really just matured as an F1 driver. Obviously, when he came in as a rookie, he was still very nervous, getting used to the car, getting used to the tracks and stuff. But he's now got this, the killer instinct where he's starting to develop, where he's able to push the pace and, push the absolute limit, get the most out of the car as much as he can. He had a good finish, P5. He's third in the championship right now. He's 5 points ahead of Valtteri, who's in supposedly the best car in the grid, or one of the best cars in the grid. Props to him, but also props to Daniel Ricciardo because I think in Formula One, people underestimate, how hard it is actually to overtake. Like you play the video game, it's like, oh, it seems easy to overtake. But when you're actually in an F1 car and on there, it is very hard to overtake, especially on, I guess I don't say Portugal is a hard track to overtake, but I mean, there's limited spots where you can overtake and have your opportunities and stuff. For him to go from 16th to 9th and score points for McLaren to help, maintain that championship midfield fight with Ferrari in terms of third place in the championship. It was great for him to see, a great weekend for McLaren overall. It started out not so great with Ricciardo qualifying P16, but still it finished with, a double points finish for McLaren.
Yeah, when we're talking about the difficulties of overtaking, Portugal is a very interesting track because it's not a track that you would see on the game and be like, oh, this is a hard track to overtake on. But if we saw it from last year's Grand Prix and we saw it in this year's Grand Prix, there are limited places to pass. but also Portugal is unreasonably slippy, very slippery, slippy. Very either way, it's very hard to keep the car facing forward. We saw that in all the practice sessions. You saw Verstappen, he complained about grip. Hamilton complained about grip. Most of the top drivers were complaining about grip all weekend, and we saw Nikita Mazepin going back on the Nikita Mazepin talk. He did spin a lot.
That was smooth. That was smooth.
He did spin a couple of times, and he wasn't the only one to do so at Portugal this weekend. He did have some struggles, but so did almost everyone in the grid. It's a very, very hard track to keep the car facing forward. And in addition to that, not only is there limited places to overtake, not only is the track slippery, but the two major factors, which most people don't talk about, is the changes in elevation and also the amount of wind the drivers experienced on race day. It was a very windy day. It was sunny, which was great for slick racing and everything, made the grip a bit better for some drivers. But it was very windy, according to some of the drivers, and they were saying this is very hard to keep the car facing forward or know how much I need to turn or brake and everything when the wind is hitting the car that much. It's one thing that you don't see in the games because they can't mimic how hard the wind's hitting the car when you're sitting at home in your nice little air-conditioned setup. Like you won't be able to feel the wind hitting you. And that's one of the things a lot of people don't talk about F1. Gs are very, very hard when they hit the drivers, but the wind also affects it. And when it comes to the changes in elevation, Portugal, I think, is one of the tracks that has the largest changes in elevation. If you watch the track from certain camera angles, there's times where the cars are going up and down like this on hills. That's just how it looks. And sure, for us, we're like, oh, they're professional drivers. They should know how to pass in those situations. But people don't realize how dangerous it is to pass in those parts of the track. Like I know for us, we're seeing on TV, it's like, yeah, there's a left turn up ahead. And yeah, the drivers know that there's a left turn up ahead because they've raced on the track. They've done countless laps in practice. They know. But you're not going to feel confident. I'm going to pass this dude and dive bomb him through the inside or break it late on the outside when you're going up a hill and you can't see the corner just yet. The amount of anticipation of passing corners like that, very, very tough. So got to give props to where it's due to drivers who were able to make ballsy passes in certain corners like that. Portugal isn't exactly the easiest track to overtake on, it seems. And that's one thing a lot of us need to start considering, not really like fans of motorsport that know about those things, but the people that are getting into the sport recently, as we've seen a large growth in Formula One recently.
Yeah, I know. I would 100% agree with you. Fans need to know they're like it's so much harder to overtake in situations. It's good. Like they do call the was it Portimao the circuit, the roller coaster and stuff because of the elevation change, because of the wind and stuff, and like they do feel those G forces. There's certain tracks and stuff where they're clipping like 4.6 Gs, and like you've seen videos of them doing like F1 drivers like training and stuff, and how much G force they're feeling. So until you actually go into like actual full simulator and try that out, you can't really say, oh, that's easy, or like he should overtake them then there, or how did he miss that overtake? It's like no, it's not taking a left turn and a right turn and just it's not as easy as people think and stuff. So I think that's one thing you have to consider. But yeah, no, there was definitely some impressive drives this weekend, and yeah, Nikita Mazepin as well. Just on the last time we talked with Nikita Mazepin, I feel like he does get a lot of, I'd not say he gets a lot of not unwarranted hate, but like somewhat warranted. But I feel like I just want to say this, that I feel that it's very tough to be in Formula One, to get into Formula One. And, you have to respect the grind to get into Formula One. And when he does well, it's good to see, because all I want is success for Formula One drivers, for Mick Schumacher to have good, Nikita Mazepin as well, to see success, because they do work so hard, even if, they have fans or not. So just want to leave it on that note. Yeah.
Like I'm not a fan of Nikita. I've mentioned it several times on this show. I've mentioned it to my Formula One friends. I've mentioned it online. Not a fan of Nikita Mazepin. If you see how he races, if I have to pick one person, like if I have to pick a couple of drivers on the grid that like you're like, okay, if I put them in a good car, like would they succeed or outperform the car? And honestly, I only see two drivers on the grid that don't do that, and that's Nicholas Latifi, who's a borderline F1 driver, and Nikita Mazepin, who I don't see has the talent to be an F1 driver. We know he's in there because of his dad's money, and that's not a problem. F1 is a sport of money. If you can bring in the sponsors, if you can bring in the money, you're going to get a seat. That's just how it's always been, and that's how it always will be. Michael Schumacher started out as a pay driver because Mercedes-Benz wanted to put him in a car. Lewis Hamilton had a huge deal with McLaren sponsoring him growing up, and that's why he got into the sport. Like, we know pay drivers when we see one. We see the Sergei Sorotkins in years past. We see Nikita Mazepin this year. They're paid drivers because they bring in the money. They bring in the sponsors. But Sergio Perez was also a paid driver originally because he has almost every company in Mexico sponsoring his car. Like, F1,
Mhm.
F1 is just bringing in the sponsors. If you can bring it in, you get a seat. It doesn't matter so much about talent. So we see guys like Wang Yuzhou. We see guys like Callum Ilott. We see Robert Schwartzman. We see all these guys in F2. We can see Pascal Wehrlein, who hasn't been in F1 for various years. He's proven. He already raced in F1. He proved that he can participate with the big boys. He has the talent to be here. But he doesn't have the sponsors behind him to get him in, while guys like Mazepin do. So I feel like that's an interesting point we need to bring up, because that's just how it is in racing. You can't be the best. You also need to have the backing behind you to get you to those points. It sucks to mention, because it's true, Nikita Mazepin, he isn't the best driver, but I feel like even if we don't like the driver as a person, even if we don't like him in some things, if we want to be proper sportsmen, we got to give credit where it's due based off of the performance. The person behind the wheel shouldn't matter. If you're like, okay, this guy, he did well to get pace out of the car. Got to respect it. Because if we saw Lewis Hamilton put on something that Mazepin did, not because Mazepin is way worse than Lewis Hamilton. If they're in the same machinery, I'm pretty sure Hamilton could somehow drag that Haas car into a podium if he really wanted to. Like Hamilton is that good.
Mhm.
But like the problem is, like, if it's any other driver, if they have a better image, you would see more people praising that performance for Mazepin. But because it's Nikita Mazepin, he's not getting much praise. And I just feel like as a fan of the sport, you got to just say, hey, you know what? He had a solid Grand Prix. Done. Next. Move on to Barcelona.
Mhm.
That's just how it has to be.
Definitely. All right, with that, we'll just thank you guys for all watching. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the intermissionsports.com for more content.
Peace out.